This is Cheddar Local Edition. I'm Brad Pomerantz. We are joined today by Joe Brady. He is the president of the Victor Valley Community College District in the High Desert. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you.
I know that you've been working long and hard to see Victor Valley College be reaccredited, and it was not for sure it was going to happen.
No, but
Give us some history, though, if we can.
We've probably been on probation 5 out of the last 9 or 10 years. Didn't have a real good track record with the state. We've had 8 or 9 superintendents in 12 years.
Wow.
So we've had a lack of leadership. The board came together in June of 2014, right. And we hired, actually it was I think late May, and we hired Dr. Roger Wagner, who had been with Copper Mountain.
Right, he's been on our program.
Absolutely, a team builder. He was able to bring the different employee groups together. We had a serious budget deficit.
And let's talk about that, because that really is the key. In the final analysis, the accrediting commission was looking at 2 issues. They were looking at student learning outcomes, we'll get there in a second, and they were looking at long-term fiscal health. And that seemed to be one of the major sticking points, that there was a structural deficit and general deficits as well. So talk to us about what you were facing.
Community colleges, I think, across the state have a structural deficit because you don't get paid dollar for dollar. So a student, if 10,000 students pay their $46 per unit, you don't get that amount back. I've always said to my friends on the private sector, you get about probably 95, 96% back. So we had a structural deficit. When I first was appointed in February of 2011, I met with the CFO at that time. And we sat down, and when we went through government accounting, which is done differently than private sector accounting, because we can't. We can't move money around in accounts that we don't have.
I understand.
And when I had never heard the word structural deficit. I had never used the word structural deficit in my life until I became a trustee. So many of the community colleges have the same problem. I think the challenge that we had at VVC, we had it, I think, on some of our prior boards. We had it with some of our groups, not with all of our groups, is a real belief that we have a reserve over here and we're trying to hit this number with our reserve, and do we really have the structural deficit? It took a few times while I've been there for the ACCJC to come down and say,
accrediting commission,
this is a real deal. I remember I was in Sedona last August when Dr. Wagner sent the board. He's excellent about a weekly communication. So every Friday night before he goes to bed, we get a weekly report. And he had sent us a report, and he said, I have gone through, I have looked at the books, I have personally gone through, and we absolutely have a real deficit. I think that then brought people to the table in a different way. He's worked very well with our different employee partners and our different constituency groups.
What did you do then to eliminate the deficit in a prudent way without causing dramatic harm to the students and the faculty?
Well, the idea was not to cut back on any classes. We had to ask our employee partners to make some pretty serious concessions.
And let me ask you about that, because it probably was easier to ask your employee partners to make concessions 3 years ago in the midst of a recession. But it's now 2015, and the perception is the economy is improving. It probably is.
Absolutely.
But then the high desert,
we've had some challenges.
Had some challenges. So how are you able to convince your employee partners that we need concessions here?
I really think that it took the leadership of Dr. Wagner to be consistent in what he said, to be transparent. People talk about in government transparency, but you don't see it very often. And the thing I've liked about working with him this last year, if he says something, he's got the documentation. So he was able to sit down with all the different leadership and walk them through and say, here's where the issue is. So if the ship's going to go down, everybody had to know.
So do you have a sense as to what the main sticking point was, if there was one, in terms of your employee partners?
Well,
or was there a series of issues?
We have 3 different groups. We have the CTA, we have the CSEA, and we have the EFT. And if one gives a little bit, and maybe one doesn't get this, or one gets a cost of living, so you really wanted to be very consistent. Unfortunately, the pay for a part-time adjunct professor versus somebody that's a full-time is very different on an hourly basis.
And this is notorious, this fact.
Absolutely. I mean, we have 400 part-time adjunct, and we have 120 full-time. So there's the adjuncts don't get the benefit packages. So we went through the reopeners. We sat down. I think the other thing that was done, we had some legal counsel we brought in 2 years ago to start renegotiating. When we introduced Dr. Wagner in as a real person with real feelings that really got it and didn't have an ego and really, he sat at the table, eyeball to eyeball, Brad, we've got a problem. You can tell with people when they're really serious. And
No BS.
I think that our board, although we've been divided from time to time, the board, I think, really recognized that for the survival of this college, we needed to not send a message. We needed to sit down and say, what can we all do to be sure that your grandchildren and their kids have an opportunity for education?
And I must say, there are 112 community colleges in our state.
Correct.
But in the high desert, I can't think of the closest college to you. I mean,
Barstow.
Okay, so not too far, but
30 miles, and I will say this.
Still, I mean, that college needed to survive.
Absolutely. Barstow has also had its problems with accreditation. But I will say one thing that was really exciting, probably the most exciting thing that has happened since I became a trustee, and I'm glad it's somewhat happened while I was president. We brought the two colleges together here in the last month.
Meaning VVC and Barstow?
Yeah, and we had a workshop.
Oh, how interesting.
And we did it because I felt that we have a population base out there of about 450,000 people, and we have people in Barstow that are taking classes at Victor Valley. We have people at Victor Valley that are not getting classes, so they go out to Barstow. And I had been told, don't do this, don't bring these two together. And I thought, well, again, private sector says, okay, if I have a product here, and you have a product there, why don't we get together and collaborate? And that's what you say. I left there, and I have to admit, when I got home that night, I said to Deb, I said,
Deb's your wife.
Yeah. I felt that we had accomplished a lot because we really had two boards that cared, that wanted to make a difference. And I'm now pushing for that meeting to probably happen every 90 days.
Let me ask you about student outcomes, though, because that was the second point that the Accrediting Commission brought up. And I understand you met that goal. And I guess what you were really looking at was what the students felt about their education. You were looking, as I understand it, and the Accrediting Commission appreciated this effort, when evaluations were being issued, they wanted to see what the students thought.
Well, there was a bigger problem, and I remember this topic well. 2 years ago, May, we were traveling back from Park City. And we were at a standstill with our faculty partners over whether or not there was a requirement for them to do the student learning outcomes with a paycheck or to do the student learning outcomes as a part of their curriculum. The state, there were some that said, we're not going to do it unless we get paid.
Paid for what?
To do the student learning outcome, to do the report that goes with each class. So at the end of the day, you have basically a syllabus. So I'm going to keep it simple. You have a syllabus, and then you want to see what the outcome is. And there were some that felt, and quite candidly, our college, I don't think for years had handled the requirement. And this was a hot topic statewide.
But ultimately, the faculty reneged?
Ultimately, the faculty came together and I think realized that it was something that had to be done. There were probably some on the faculty that maybe didn't agree with trustees like me that felt that the state was pretty clear about what they felt needed to be done. I've been a strong advocate for the CCD, for the state college system.
You'll come back?
Yeah.
Promise?
Absolutely.
He is Joe Brady. He is president of Victor Valley Community College District. I'm Brad Palmer. It's Charter Local Edition.